Chair.
Good morning, everybody. So let's see, we will get started right away. So I will call to order the Public Improvement Commission hearing of January 25th, 2024. Mr. Lyman, please take a roll call.
Would the representative from the Public Works Department please state his or her name for the record?
Yasha Franklin Hodge.
Property Management Department.
Joseph Callahan.
Transportation Department.
Amy Gordon.
Inspectional Services Department.
Brian Ronan.
Water and Sewer Commission.
Denise Devlin.
Commission for Persons with Disabilities.
Darla Leal.
All present.
All right, thank you, Todd. On to our first item, hearing minutes at the request of the Public Improvement Commission staff, the acceptance of the minutes of the PIC hearing held on January 11th, 2024. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of January 11th, 2024.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstain? So moved. Now on to our first public hearing. Public hearing number 1 on a petition by the president and fellows of Harvard College for the acceptance of a pedestrian easement adjacent to North Harvard Street, Public Way, Brighton, located on its northwesterly side at address number 175 between Ivy Lane and South Campus Drive. This was new business on January 11th, as shown on a plan entitled City of Boston Public Works Department Engineering Division Pedestrian Easement Plan 175 North Harvard Street, Alston, one sheet dated December 2023. Would the petitioners please introduce themselves, their affiliations, give us a very brief reintroduction to this project, and then talk through any changes to this particular action since your new business hearing.
I'll start off. Good morning. My name is Susan Malott. I'm with Harvard University. I work for Harvard Capital Projects, and I'm managing the American Repertory Theater project, the new home for the American Repertory Theater at 175 North Harvard Street. I'll hand it off to John Schmidt.
Commissioners, John Schmidt with Niche Engineering. Here's just a rendering of the proposed building. I'll skip to slide 7. This is the pedestrian easement plan that we're speaking to. The easement in itself is about 1,446 square feet. It runs from Ivy Lane to South Campus Drive, and the easement is necessary in order to allow for an 8-foot wide poured concrete pedestrian access. The drawings have not changed since new business.
All right, commissioners, any questions or comments? All right, hearing none, PIC staff or members of the public?
PIC staff is all set with the easement. I will take this opportunity to remind the public, if you wish to ask questions or add testimony, please use the raised hand function, which can be found within the reactions tab at the bottom of your screen. I do not see any at this time, though.
All right, with that, do I hear a motion to approve public hearing number 1?
I'll make a motion to approve a petition by President and Fellows of Harvard College for the acceptance of a pedestrian easement adjacent to North Harvard Street as read into the record by the chair.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstain? So moved. On to public hearing number 2 on a petition by the president and fellows of Harvard College for the making of specific repairs within North Harvard Street, Public Way, Brighton, located on its northwesterly side at address number 175, generally between Ivy Lane and South Campus Drive, consisting of curb realignment, sidewalk reconstruction with structural soil, as well as new and relocated pedestrian ramps, specialty pavement, street lighting infrastructure, street trees, pedestrian fencing, bike racks, street furniture, raised crosswalks, protected bicycle facilities, and a floating bus stop. This was new business on January 11th, as shown on a set of plans entitled City of Boston Public Works Department Engineering Division, Specific Repairs Plan, 175 North Harvard Street, Harvard University, American Repertory Theater, Public Way, Alston, 3 sheets dated December 2023. Would the petitioners please reintroduce themselves and their affiliations, and then let us know what has changed, if anything, since your last hearing, and whether there are any updates on any of the issues that were discussed at that hearing.
Again, good morning. My name is Susan Malab, and I'm with Harvard University, managing the project for the ART. I'll hand it off to John Schmidt.
Good morning, John Schmidt with Niche Engineering. The drawings have not changed since new business, but I'll quickly go over what we're proposing here. We are reconstructing the sidewalk here along North Harvard Street. Here is the floating bus stop. It's been coordinated with the MBTA. Here we have a raised tabletop crosswalk, and we have a raised flush bike lane that comes through this way. These drawings go into a little bit more detail. The bike lane is 7 feet wide. Sidewalk is 8 foot wide. It's been on an 8 foot wide poured concrete sidewalk. We have 6 new street trees. We have 6 feet of pervious pavers. And we also, there was a number of questions that were raised at the new business that we'd like to speak to them now. This is a view of the bus stop, and the bus stop itself has been reviewed and coordinated with Emily Kelsey at the MBTA. So these are the issues that were raised at new business, MBTA coordination. So since then, VHB has been working with the MBTA. We get confirmation that the bus stop type, as shown on these drawings, its location and the signage is coordinated between Harvard as well as the MBTA. There's a question raised about community outreach regarding this program, this project. There were 3 Harvard task force meetings held, as well as we went through the DPDA process, and we have DPR public comments that were addressed during that process. There were questions raised about the ride share drop-off, and if I may, I think I have another screen here. The ride share drop-off here, across the street here on North Harvard Street. And here's a better view. So here's a traffic plan, but the drop-off would be over here, and then people would cross through the crosswalks through the campus this way. That has been reviewed, I believe that's been reviewed and coordinated at the Harvard Task Force, the last Harvard Task Force meeting as well. And then there was also a question raised about green infrastructure. My office met with Rachel Luna in the past week or so, and reviewed the opportunities to provide provide some additional green infrastructure. She made some suggestions, and we reviewed our drawings and documentation, and we've discussed this with Rachel, but what's being asked isn't feasible based on the existing conditions. So I believe that Rachel is satisfied with the project. That's everything I have. If you have any questions.
Commissioners, question? I have 2. One, with regards to the rideshare drop-off, has there been any conversations with rideshare companies about how the property's address will be associated with that designated drop-off area? We find that unless that is baked into their apps, that oftentimes drivers don't recognize that there is an area intended for drop-off and pickup, and therefore do it in the wrong place.
I'll answer that question. We are going to pursue those conversations as we go through our construction activity and we prepare for the building opening, but that's definitely has been all of our planning around having geofencing to prevent people from just, pulling up out front and disrupting traffic flow on North Harvard Street.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that. And obviously this is somewhat dependent on their ability and willingness to kind of cooperate with this, but appreciate you pursuing that. My one additional ask in that regard would be that whether or not, regardless of what level of geofencing they're able to offer here, that as the building is constructed and the site plans are established and the signage plan is established, that Harvard commit to ensuring that there is ample and adequate signage throughout the building and in promotional materials that sort of, like how to get to the venue, that clearly directs people to the coming by ride or leaving by rideshare to the correct locations, and that will be part of the program for the building.
Correct. And in fact, we spell all of that out in our DPR response to the city and how we can control event management, larger crowds that might be expected depending on the shows that are happening and other activity in the neighborhood.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. And then my other question, which and apologies if this was addressed at the last meeting and I'm just misremembering, but the question of winter maintenance of the bus island, who would be coordinating snow removal? Is there a clear resolution on that?
We have included those responsibilities as part of the LMI, that Harvard will manage that for the bike lane, the bus stop, shelter.
Excellent. Perfect. Those are all my questions. Appreciate your support in resolving those issues. Commissioners, any last questions?
John,
If-
quick question.
oh,
John,
okay.
can you go to the first slide in your specific repairs? I may have missed something. Okay, no, -1.
Yep.
The street that is coming off on the right-hand side, is that a private street or is that a public street?
This is most private ways encompassed.
Okay, so those, the street name signs will clearly mark them as private ways, and any type of curbside regulatory control will be, it's a private issue, right?
They are private streets, but a public way.
You
And
mean
that's-
private streets open to public travel?
Correct.
Okay, yes, sorry, Susan, that's how private ways are structured. My question is, the parking regulations along those private ways, are they going to be managed by the city's transportation department or the
By
private?
By Harvard.
By Harvard, okay.
Yeah, they currently are, and that will
Yes.
remain.
And all those parking spots are parallel parking spots, right? I can't quite make.
The spot, these are,
Are they perpendicular or parallel?
these here are perpendicular.
Okay, oh, definitely private way then.
Right.
Sorry. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, PIC staff or members of the public?
All set on this, I think.
All right, seeing no other raised hands or unmuted mics, do I hear a motion to approve public hearing number 2?
I make a motion to approve a petition by the president and fellows of Harvard College for the making of specific repairs in North Harvard Street as read into the record by the chair.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye. Any opposed or abstain? So moved. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
All right, on to our next order of business, public hearing number 3 on a petition by Atlantic Oliver Mass LLC for the acceptance of a pedestrian easement adjacent to Island Street Public Way, Roxbury, located on its southerly side west of Massachusetts Avenue. This was new business on January 11th, as shown on a plan entitled City of Boston Public Works Department Engineering Division Pedestrian Easement Plan, 909 Massachusetts Avenue and Island Street, Boston, Roxbury, one sheet dated January 17th, 2022, revised November 11th, 2023. Would the proponents please introduce themselves and their affiliations and let us know how you'd like to proceed today?
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Attorney Nick Zazula, McDermott, Quilty, Miller, and Hanley here on behalf of the petitioner. Unfortunately, we're going to ask for continuance until February 8th. I can give you some background as to that, Mr. Chair. Since the last hearing 2 weeks ago, agreements are pretty much ready for signature with Chong and the legal department, which I know was a big question for you, Commissioner, Mr. Chair, last time. We've also worked out the details with Rachel on the concrete island, kind of bioretention green area at the corner of Island and Mass Ave. So we did make some progress. However, there's an outstanding issue that we're trying to resolve with street lighting as to the Mass Ave improvements, street lights, and kind of the petitioner's requirements as to what they need to do and what's outstanding there. And we're just haven't gotten to the point yet where we're comfortable presenting, don't want to waste your time at this point. And additionally, on top of all that, our engineer is actually on vacation this week. We thought we would hope to have all this buttoned up, but we just don't feel comfortable, and he's just unable to review and provide input as to kind of the street lighting aspect, which is a fairly big component, which we want to make sure we're comfortable with, and obviously street lighting's comfortable with as to how to proceed. So with that being said, you know, we did make some progress, but we would like to ask to have a continuance until we believe 2 weeks would be enough time to finalize this open-ended issue. So respectfully asking for a continuance, please.
Thank you very much for that update, and thank you for continued work on resolving outstanding items, and also for continuing to work through the remaining street lighting items with our street lighting division. That's a critical public safety element of any project, and so important to get it right, and appreciate you all taking that very seriously. Is there any commissioners want to comment before we move ahead to consider the continuance? All right, do I hear a motion to continue public hearing number 3?
I'll make a motion to continue public hearing number 3 as read into the record by the chair.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstain? So moved. Thank you. We'll see you in 2 weeks. All right, on to public hearing number 4 on a petition by Atlantic Oliver Mass LLC for making of specific repairs within the following public ways in Roxbury, consisting of curb realignment, sidewalk reconstruction, as well as new and relocated pedestrian ramps, street lighting infrastructure, and driveway curb cuts. Massachusetts Avenue on its southwesterly side at address numbers 903 to 909, generally southeast of Island Street west of Massachusetts Avenue. New business from January 11th as shown on a plan entitled City of Boston Public Works Department Engineering Division, Specific Repair Plan 909 Massachusetts Avenue and Island Street, Boston, Roxbury, one sheet dated January 17th, 2022, revised November 11th, 2023. Would the petitioners please reintroduce themselves, their affiliations, and confirm whether you'd like to continue this hearing item as well.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Attorney Nick Zazula, McDermott, Quilty, Miller, and Hanley here in Boston. Apologies, Mr. Chair, to make you read that whole one. I'll just say ditto on my end, and yes, we'd like to request a continuance. Thank you very much.
All right, do I hear a motion to continue? Public hearing number 4.
I'll make a motion to continue public hearing number 4 as read into the record by the chair.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstain? All right, so moved. We will, once again, see you back here in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
All right, and that concludes the public hearing section of our agenda today. And so we will move on to new business number 1, 24 Dry Dock Avenue, South Boston, projection license on a joint petition by Brennan Dry Dock LLC and the Boston Redevelopment Authority, BBA, the Boston Planning and Development Agency. I believe this item is making its second appearance on our new business agenda. If the proponents would please introduce themselves, their affiliations, and give us a brief update on where we stand. I think we don't need the full project briefing again, given that this was on new business 2 weeks ago, but it would be great just to get a brief update on where we are on this and how this is expected to proceed.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board for your time today. I'm here representing Cronin Dry Dock LLC. On our team today, we also have Michael Kniepe, COO of Cronin Development, John Polgini as legal representation, our architect from SGA, Xinyao Huang, and John Schmidt from Niche Engineering. As you mentioned, we were on new business 2 weeks ago. There was a hiccup with the notice, so we are just back here to make sure everything is done properly and move forward. As we discussed last time, there's a projection license for, and I'll just pull up the visuals in case anybody was not able to see last time. So 24 Dry Dock is located within the Ray L. Flynn Marine Industrial Park, about 237,000 square feet of life science. And we are looking for a projection license for a canopy that will go over Dry Dock Ave. Here's just an overview of where the project is, a rendering of what the canopy will look like. And as we discussed last time, the canopy was designed within the measurements that PIC would typically require. So there will be a 15-foot minimum vertical clearance, and it will project about 4.5 feet over the sidewalk. So I'll stop there, and please let me know if you need any more information. But as mentioned, we went through this in detail a few weeks ago, so hopefully it's still fresh in everyone's mind.
Yep, I appreciate that. And for the record, if anybody is looking for that more detailed presentation, you will find it in the recording of the January 11th PIC hearing that is available for anyone who wants that reference. I know that there is a couple of outstanding items and questions related to this, or at least a few outstanding questions related to this at the last new business. I think we can perhaps, if there's an update on any of those that you want to share now, that would be fine, or we can defer that to the public hearing that you will presumably have again in 2 weeks. So I'll give the proponents a chance if there's any updates that you want to share now with the commission. Otherwise, we can just do it all in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt Donovan from the Boston Planning and Development Agency. We are co-petitioners on this. Just as a minor update, we are moving forward with drafting language that will create an administrative fix for the accompanying and future improvements that we anticipate will need PIC review. And we anticipate that I'll have language for Todd well before the public hearing that'll sort of codify what that process will look like, but it will include PIC review prior to the issuance of a full building permit of streetscape improvements yet to be transferred.
Excellent, thank you. I'm glad to hear that we're making some progress on that. Commissioners, any questions for the proponents? PIC staff or members of the public?
Just for the record, I'll remind everybody that this street, Red Rock Ave, is currently under EDIC's jurisdiction, but the EDIC and the city have been in talks to transfer authority to the city. So because of that, this project is coming through the PIC process at this time.
Great. Seeing and hearing no other comments, will you be ready for your public hearing officially in 2 weeks?
Yes.
All right, we will see you on February 8th, correct, Todd?
Yes, correct.
All right. All right. Thanks so much. We'll see you back then. On to new business number 2, 415 Summer Street, South Boston, pedestrian easement, specific repairs on a set of petitions by the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority. Would the proponents please introduce themselves, their affiliations, give us an overview of the project, and walk us through the specific actions that are being proposed today.
Good morning, John Schmidt with Niche Engineering. I believe folks from the MCCA are on board. I was hoping that they would jump in. I'm working with the MCCA, and Homeland Security has requested that it's requiring that they install new bollards to meet new requirements. And this process started several years ago, and now we're to the point where we can bring it before the commission. This is the existing condition plan of the area where there are some existing bollards there now. The red line you can see is the existing easement. To move it forward, here's a rendering of what future bollards will look like. There'll be planters and then bollards. The spacing between the bollards is approximately 3.93 feet, and the spacing between the planter and the bollard is 4.62 feet. The bollards are set back 8.86 feet from the curb face. The idea of this rendering isn't that these renderings aren't current, but they're an older set. It's misleading. If you allow me to zoom in here a little bit. Here's a plan view of it. So we've been working closely with BTD over the last 9 months or so, and understand they've recently implemented their pilot program for the bike lane here. And so the idea is that presently I understand that the bikes come down, run along here, along the gutter of the sidewalk. But should this change in the future and the city determines that the bike should be coming on the sidewalk here, this area is at 8.8 feet wide, is designed and appropriate for the bike lane, and this as well has been talked through multiple agencies at the city. The bike lane would then move up here, and the pedestrian path of travel would go behind the bollards here. And because this may ultimately force the pedestrian to go behind the bollards, we are also increasing the easement that's there. Here's another one. Here's the proposed easement plan. This is different than the one that was submitted for new business because it's in the process of being developed. Essentially, the easement would run along the edge of the existing easement. It would provide 16 feet of clearance from the proposed bollards planters to the edge of the easement line. There was one little pinch point here around the step. The clearance there is still 11.7 feet. Here's some details. The design of itself is fairly complicated because it is on a bridge deck. So the placement and location of the bollards and planters are really being driven by the support system and steel layout of the bridge deck below it. This is what was submitted to you and has been superseded regarding pedestrian easement plan. And then I understand that there's been some question about the Blue Bike Station. So through conversations we had with BTD last summer is that the convention center is committed to moving the Blue Bike Station here, which is essentially here on this drawing here. And there's adequate space here for the Blue Bike Station without impeding the pedestrian experience on the sidewalk. We feel this is a nice, safe location for it, and because it's really just, right now it's just wasted concrete space that could serve well for a bike station. Does the commission have any questions?
Commissioners? Amy, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit and just ask you to speak a little bit to the statement by Mr. Schmidt that there is been sufficient space left in between the bollards and the curb line to accommodate a future bike lane on the sidewalk level, at the sidewalk level, as well as loading for the cab stand that exists in front of the convention center at this location.
Yeah, it's not enough space for a bike lane, for the signage and all of the other stuff that would be in a furnishing zone, as well as for people to get out of the cabs at the cab stand. So we need bare minimum, right, for us to maintain is 7.5 feet. But outboard of that would need to be a place to have all of the signs, equipment, and a place for people to safely get out of a cab without that being directly into a bike lane.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I think, a couple of things here. So, one, the city has had a very long-standing plan to create protected bicycle infrastructure along Summer Street, and that goes back at least as far as the Go Boston 2030 report, which I believe is now 7 years old, which specifically called this out as a priority project. And certainly subsequent work has been done, including the current pilot configuration that exists with a sub-minimum width bike and buffer facility, but which is at least there to kind of test what it would be like to have a facility there. The other consideration here, which I imagine is one that is shared by the BCEC, is that this is an area with a lot of loading activity, and it is a priority for the city to make sure that that loading here especially, but in a location with this volume in particular, is accessible, is comfortable, is safe, that we are minimizing conflicts between people who are getting in and out of vehicles, that we're making it convenient for folks who maybe have a mobility challenge to get where they need to go, and that we're not creating avoidable conflict points or narrow pinch points where bikes and somebody stepping out of a cab who maybe is visiting from a place without bike lanes and doesn't recognize that they're entering into or right adjacent to somebody's travel lane, where there's a potential for conflict or safety concerns there. And so I think, just to amplify Amy's comment, the 8.86 feet that has been left here is concerning to us as an insufficient width to accommodate that bike facility, and do so in a way that ensures comfortable, accessible loading for at the curb. My understanding is that there have been several years of back and forth conversations about this issue between BTD and the proponents, and that after quite a bit of discussion and analysis, that the proponents conclusion is that the bollards cannot be relocated at all further away from the curb to create a wider zone in between the bollards and the curb line. John, can you confirm that that is a correct statement of the proponent's position on this?
Actually, I'm going to defer to Matt, who was with SGH and the engineer of record on the bollard design.
Sure. So I'm Matt Sherman with Simpson, Gumpertz, and Hager. We did pull the bollards have been moved back from where they originally were, right, as this. What we've done is pulled them back as far as that structure allows. John, if you could flip back to page 7. I think the kind of the key here is that, remember, this is all elevated structure. So it's kind of that section down on number 6. This is all deck. This is all elevated deck that's supported. And the way the waterproofing and the structural system works in there, and the way these bollards, these are crash rated, they've been tested. Bollards, they have a certain dimension to them, to the bases, to be able to meet that crash worthiness testing and certification that's needed. They fit, we've pushed them back as far as we can until they start hitting the structure for the steps and the other pieces of all this elevated deck. It's a pretty complicated structural system that's up there. So we did squeeze as much as we could back, and we even pulled the planters back to be able to maximize the width there based on feedback to the comments, the initial comments from the preliminary plans. So we did pull them back. We're trying to squeeze as much room as we can out of that.
Got it. But it is, from your perspective, structurally with the system design that you need to meet the security requirements, further movement of the bollards from the curb line is not possible given the complexities of the structure on which you are intending to install these bollards.
Correct. We run into other pieces of this elevated structure that's behind it, and where the steps start moving up, there's a lot going on structurally in there. The bollard line would start getting very ragged and still have pinch points.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful, and appreciate the work that's been done to sort of maximize that space, given the complexity of that underground environment. And I think we're not here as a commission to kind of challenge in any way that structural engineering or analysis. And I think appreciate that this has been well studied and well exercised. That said, given the nature of the structure and the limitations that it poses on bollard placement, we find ourselves considering an action that would result in bollards being placed in a way that is not, from our perspective and the perspective of the Transportation Department, fully compatible with the goals that we have for multimodal transportation along this corridor and for accessibility of the loading area. I will sort of start, with one question, which is to help us understand the kind of decision around bollards. I understand you're working under a Homeland Security directive around the security of the convention center, and we obviously want to be supportive of that, but we do see that there's a mix of planters, which can you explain how the planters and the bollards differ from one another? Are the planters anchored into the structure of the surface in the same way that the bollards are? Is there a reason? If not, is there a reason why this project can be accomplished with planters? Can you give us a little bit more clarity on the specific need for bollards in this general vicinity of this location?
Sure. So that's the planters are actually recommended in the guideline documents from like Homeland and some of the forest protection documents that help break up the appearance of them. So they recommend a mix of them. You could kind of look similar buildings with similar levels of threat protection would be like the Federal Reserve Bank or the courthouse up by North Station. Right, those are kind of the similar levels that are supposed to be able to stop a truck moving 30 or 40 miles an hour, depending on the zone. So the planters are, everything's kind of anchored in this same relatively thin slab. That's really the big challenge here, is that the slab itself is very thin. So there are these metal embedded pieces for the bollards that hold that, that hold it down. So the mix of them is they're both intended to be rated. One is rated through design, and that the bollards themselves are actually crash tested. So you can't adjust them. They're an off-the-shelf item. And the other piece that comes into play is we weren't part of the threat assessment that was done, but the challenge is always, it's always a trade-off. If we want the people behind the bollards, because that's who the bollards are protecting, right? If you move the bollards too far back, the people then become in front of the bollards. You lose standoff distance from the facility, and you also have more people in front of the ball, right? So there's kind of a conflict of desire, right? We want to have as many people behind the bollards to protect them from an errant vehicle, but by their nature, the bollards also, are a piece that slows down progress through it. So it's kind of a catch. You got to play the two sides against each other. But the mix there, we could have done it with all bollards, but the intent was to try to increase the visibility and kind of the appearance of the streetscape. It was at the request of the BCEC to intersperse it with the planters to try to break up the appearance of it and make it look a little bit less like, say, the Fed Reserve Bank does downtown. Oh, you're muted, sir.
Thank you for that. So just to confirm, the planters themselves, do they have the same substructural anchoring requirements as the bollards? As in, like, I guess what I'm asking is there a version of this design that dispenses with bollards, uses only planters, and, with all appreciation for the distance issue and, wanting to not push the protection too far back towards the building, is there a version of this design that would, have just planters and would therefore allow for, a foot or two of additional space to be captured in between the protection and the curb line, which is probably all that would be necessary, I think, to achieve the goals that we're mutually trying to achieve?
Yeah, I'll say we haven't chased that down, but it basically would become a wall of planter. The planters could only have about 4 feet of space between them. So it would end up being like a solid wall of planters, right? So you're going to lose a lot of ability to pass between, right? Right now there's a lot of open space, right? For every 4 foot opening, approximately 4 foot opening, we've got one bollard. If we switched it to all planters, you'd have like 4 feet of planter and 4 feet of opening. So you'd go down to about 50% capacity passing between them.
Got it. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that makes sense and seems less than ideal from just both a experience perspective and the visual perspective, but I appreciate that. And but confirming though that at a structural level, the planters are not anchored in the similar fashion to the bollards, correct?
Oh, they have a similar base size. If you go to 7 there again, John, you can see that's the section. You can see the underneath. Scroll down just a little bit down on the page, right? You can see the security bollard, that detail 4 shows kind of the depth of those, what we call the biscuits. And then planter 6 is the section through the planter itself. And so there's a significant, if you zoom in there on 6, you see the foundation. I can't quite read the number. I'd say 87 inches extending fore and aft from the planter. So they're going to hit about the same thing, right? There's a lot going on underneath the surface to anchor those in.
Got it. This is a very weighty planter, I guess, as it needs to be for.
That's what they need to do their job. Yeah.
I will also note that if the purpose of these bollards is to pedestrians, and we leave an 8-foot cement concrete path in front of the bollards that lines up with the sidewalk on either side, that is going to be where pedestrians walk. There's no incentive to walk behind the bollards. So all pedestrians, people waiting for cabs and bicycles will be in front of the bollards, and nobody would naturally find themselves behind it.
right? So they'd be unprotected.
Correct.
Okay, so given these limitations and given, you know, this sort of, this challenge of balancing of interests here, I guess a subsequent question, there does seem to be one other potential way to achieve the goal of a wider zone between the curb edge and the protection system that's being proposed, which would be to move the curb line of along this stretch of Summer Street into what is now street, or what is currently bike lane, right? And in doing so, that would widen this sort of this 8.83 feet sidewalk zone. Is that a idea that has been explored, and are there technical barriers that you see to that, or is that something that has not yet been fully considered?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. There's actually along the curb line right now, if you go out and look at it, there's a joint. Those are two separate structures. There's one structure that's the BCEC building that has the sidewalk on it, and the other structure is the roadway structure, which is where the maintenance of highway is. So there's actually a construction joint, there's a joint that runs along kind of where that red line is, right along the face of the curb line. There's actually, if you go out there and look, there's a narrow joint that you can see in the pavement that runs there that differentiates the BCEC structure from the roadway. So that joint would have to get, and they're physically separate structures. So there'd be a little bit of pieces, and would have to be building out on the, I'm not sure who the owner of the actual roadway is, but I think it's outside of the limits of BCEC's property.
Could the joint be at sidewalk level instead of roadway level?
It could be, but I don't know that you'd want to be running a bike lane along.
No, it would be in the furnishing zone, right? Like if we leave the existing curb where it is, and then create another curb, probably not granite because we don't want it to go into anything, but like a cement concrete or poured curb, outboard of that, then this joint and all of the signs and other things that would typically find their way into a furnishing zone could be in this space from the existing curb to this new curb, and it not being a place that you would naturally walk. It would act as our furnishing zone, but it would leave the joint kind of the way it is, just bring the roadway up on the other side.
Yeah, I'll say we have not been asked to chase through that option. I haven't looked closely at it.
Okay. So that might be one thing to explore. I want to put an idea in your heads, because we're going to, I think, ask you to explore this in more detail between now and your public hearing. There are some modular systems that other cities have used in maybe not this precise situation, but to create floating bus stops and loading areas where constructed improvements are challenging due to some some obstacle, whether it be drainage or perhaps a bridge joint or a structural joint. And these are modular materials using modular platforms that essentially create a sidewalk extension off of a curb line that are highly durable, kind of winter rated modular segments that still can allow for access underneath the modular platform for drainage, for maintenance, and they, in some cases, have been used to do sizable long extensions of a curb off of its constructed location, and are frequently used in contexts like this where there is a need for ensuring that bikes and pedestrian loading of some kind can happen safely and with sufficient space for all parties to stay separate from each other. So that is obviously a non-constructed potential approach to this, but could potentially, if viable here, allow for that curb line extension. I think My perspective on this is that I am very reluctant to approve a design that feels a permanent change to the sidewalk here that is incompatible with the city's stated objectives around bike access and pedestrian and loading accessibility without a very clear plan for how we would achieve those goals through other means. And so I think what I would like to see is that the proponents work to establish that clear plan now and to bake it into your submission for PIC review and approval so that we know what we are approving now is both addressing the security goals of the BCEC and the transportation and accessibility goals of the city, and that we're not ultimately trading one of those things off against the other by approving permanent changes to the right of way. So we'd be happy to connect offline to share what resources we've seen from other cities and doing modular systems. And I think it is worth exploring this question that folks have raised around the joint and whether that can be raised up to sidewalk level if a constructed extension of the curb is viable. I think, we've shown in the current pilot configuration that there is space in the roadway that could be used to extend the curb, provided that the bike lane can be put onto the sidewalk. And so, that it looks like 7 feet in the current configuration, a 4-foot bike lane and a 3-foot buffer could conceivably become or some portion of that could become a very comfortable, accessible curbside loading area for people getting out of a cab, while also allowing for bikes to safely travel in between the new curb edge and the bollards. That, I think, from our perspective, would be an ideal outcome for a project like this. So I think what my ask would be is that the proponents work with us to explore some of these ideas between now and a public hearing, and that we hopefully can come up with a comprehensive solution that addresses all of these issues together.
Understood. I do have one question, getting back to the question you had about the planters. Because now the planters and the bollards, they provide a straight line that's 8.8 feet off the curb line. If we were to remove the planters entirely, and then we could move the bollards back to widen that 8.86 feet to possibly 10 feet, would that satisfy your concerns? Although we lose the planters and we lose some of the aesthetics, but I think that would meet your objective of having a wider bike lane. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, Amy, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that as long as we have enough dimension to have the bike lane operate and be maintained just separate from where you would unload and put signage, then, right, like that's all that we care about. So as long as it works dimensionally, then I think that seems potentially viable.
Thank you.
John, so in this model, because it looks like the curb edge of the planters is sort of flush with the bollard line, are you saying that the bollards could actually be anchored to what is the building edge of the planter, that line, instead of where the curb edge of the planter? Am I understanding that proposal correctly?
I'm going to defer to Matt.
I'd have to double check and see where the pinch points are. I'm pretty sure we pushed them back about as far as we could go, but I'll go back and look.
Okay. I think we'd be open to considering that, and we need to kind of we're into inches here, so it's probably best done offline of this hearing to kind of walk through the very specific proposals and make sure that there would be sufficient widths. So I think my ask here is that we have a subsequent conversation, a series perhaps of subsequent conversations about what the options here that can achieve both the BCEC security goals and the city's multimodal and accessibility goals. And hopefully we can, one of these options may provide a comprehensive solution that could then become the basis for what we move forward with.
So, so the question now is, do we think we'll be ready for a public hearing on February 8th? My hope is that we are, and if we're not, then we could ask for an extension to the end of February.
I think that's fine if you guys are okay with trying to work expeditiously on this. I don't want to kind of set up the extra labor of a continuance for everyone if, you know, we don't think that 2 weeks is a realistic timeline, but if given the things that we've put forth as potential and you've put forth as potential resolutions to this, you think that 2 weeks might be sufficient, then I don't have a problem with continuing this or with putting you on a public hearing in 2 weeks.
I can't speak to that because that would be Matthew's call. If he thinks it's something that they could explore in the next 2 weeks, or would you do you think we're better off waiting than the public hearing on February 29th?
I think we could have we could look at the clearances and the like, but there's also a substantial portion that I think BCECs, I don't want to speak for them, but they may want to look at the loading, those kind of pieces of it as well, and the streetscape, and kind of the uses of the space. I could get the geometry done, but we won't have the analysis. We could see if there's any busts, I guess, by that point in time.
Okay.
I mean, given that BCEC, it sounds like it's still not present on the call for this discussion, and that they're, to your point, Matt, very correctly, that they are a key party in this, I am inclined to push this, to put you on the public hearing schedule for 4 weeks from now, because it feels like we don't have them here to confirm that they are going to work expeditiously on this from a operational perspective, as you are confirming you will do from an engineering perspective. So rather than waste time with a continuance, I think we should push this out for a couple extra weeks to give everyone time to work through this.
Mr. Chair, John Donahue from the Convention Authority.
Oh, you are here. Hi.
Yes, sir. Again, a lot to absorb. I would probably recommend that we ask for that extension just to give us the time for the due diligence that may occur, and just to ask questions such as if we do jump the property line per se and have to take structure out into the street, has that ever become a city street, or is it still MassDOT? And does that complicate the design by their
It's a city street over MassDOT structure, but we will handle that piece of it if we have a design.
So we would welcome any information, Amy, that you want to share, and we'll get working on that. Just from a 30,000 foot elevation, there would be a concern from the authority is losing that aesthetic quality. We were hoping trying not to become a fortress looking with just a series of bollards. That's why we went with illuminated bollards, and the plantings were a huge concern for us to try and, you know, have some sort of aesthetic quality or beautification to the front and not be so sterile. If not a bollard, if there's an alternative to a planter, we'd be open for that too. But, you know, natural green, those kind of things were highly considered, I must say. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and it makes sense that, you know, the goal is not to look like you're welcoming people to a federal building, and so that is very reasonable, and I hope that, you know, we can come up with a resolution for this here that enhances, even above and beyond what's currently proposed, the experience of an arriving visitor. I mean, that's, you know, we want the convention center to be successful. It is an important asset in the city. And, you know, I will say there's a bit of personal opinion on this, but the current pilot configuration is not great, right? Because we do have people coming out of a narrow cab stand lane, entering into a tight buffer, and then crossing a bike lane and then stepping up onto a curb. That's not an ideal passenger experience and welcome experience either. And so I think part of our interest in encouraging you to explore that curb line extension is that we think that that could result in a far better experience for visitors to the convention center and a much more accessible experience for visitors to the convention center than even the current configuration as it exists today. So I'm hoping that we can find a technical way to produce that outcome, but I think clearly some work is going to be needed. So I think we'd be happy to welcome you back in 4 weeks, and hopefully that is sufficient time, and we will do everything we can to work through with you any of the ownership issues, any of the kind of legal complexities that might come along with pursuing an option like that if it proves to be feasible and acceptable to everyone.
Yeah, I just tell you the convention center is perfectly willing to consider holistically point to point. So as far back as we can push the protective devices, whatever they may be, if that's one boundary, and then whatever boundary we can work to out into the public thoroughfare is part of that whole comprehensive, you know, who gets what slice of the pie. We're perfectly willing to work with the city and the teams to divvy it up however works best, whether the cap stands or those come in question or any of those kind of considerations. We're accepting all suggestions.
Great. Well, we will be pleased to work with you in the coming weeks on that. Before we move on from this item, I think we kind of got right into this issue, but I just want to make sure if there's any other concerns or considerations from other commissioners that they want to raise, or from PIC staff or members of the public.
Chief, 1 second. John, good to see you. Matt? Hi, Matt.
Hi.
Okay, so Matt, I'm going to assume that the surface footprint on the sidewalk for a bollard is much less than the planter. Correct? Correct.
Correct.
So now I'll try and spit this thing out and then you work it backwards. A series of bollards, because that gives the minimum footprint and you can push it as much back as possible. Now think about the scenario where every 4th or 5th bollard, and I'm going to say something really stupid, but hopefully it'll make the point. Let's assume you dress it up by putting a garbage bin over it, where the garbage bin in itself is not part of the structural load carrying capacity or the threat assessment capacity, but at least you make the damn thing look a little bit nicer. Okay, you with me so far? If I take a Victor Stanley Walker garbage bin and plop it over the bollard, at least it doesn't look like bollard, 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 bollard. It'll look bollard, 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 maybe a garbage bin. Now, I'm fairly certain that there are also modular landscape, little pits. What do you call those things? Jesus Christ. What was the other thing you were trying to put in? A landscape element? Okay, so I think you can put stuff that camouflages the functionality of the bollard where it gives some aesthetic improvement. Am I making any sense to you, Matt? Do you follow?
Yeah, yep, we follow you, and that's actually the BCEC did. They wanted to put sleeves over the bollards with lights on them, and then some planter elements as the light. The challenge here is these have to be crash tested because to meet the security requirements, right? There are some, the key thing, you'll see a lot of bollards around like a hotel. Most of them aren't real. Yeah.
Sorry, Matt. The point is, your bollard is going to be inside the garbage bin. Let's assume that it's the garbage bin, okay? So the front of the garbage bin is going to get smashed, but the bollard is going to hold the truck in place. With me so far? So that's what I'm looking at, where it's a sleeve over the bollard where you look a little bit nicer.
Right.
Okay.
And I'm right with you. And just remember those bollard. It's more than the bollard itself. From those drawings, it actually is like the base behind it actually reaches back, I think 5 feet or something. It's a big L-shaped base underneath.
Yep.
So we're trying to push them back as far as we can.
Yeah,
but again,
I know that. You're pushing it as
too.
far back as possible, but that's why I started off with the surface area.
Yeah.
Okay? Because it's the surface area that is going to impede Amy's ability to make sure that there are functioning bike lanes and all the other multimodal things the chief was asking. Okay? So where the dressing over the bollard is not serving the crash worthiness aspect of it. It doesn't need to be. In fact, you want the damn thing to disintegrate. Okay? But it'll be, so just give it some thought and see whether that sort of a solution has been tried somewhere else or, sort it out.
Also, another stupid question, but right, based on your canopy, if there were planters here, they'd never see sunlight.
we've had discussions with our landscapers and such like that, and there's the selected vegetation took that into account. So there's a variety of things that will give color but don't need direct sunlight. So, but yeah, point taken. We got planters further back, Amy, that we struggle. You know, brown doesn't look so good sometimes.
All right, excellent. Well, I appreciate everybody's thoughts on this and willingness to work with us on this. And so I think, you know, I'll give one last opportunity for folks to speak up or ask questions.
I'll chime in with one kind of maybe minor thing. I forget if it was Matt, you, or somebody else who mentioned that some of these bulbs are going to be lighted or lit. Is that true?
Yes, that's the plan.
Yeah, so we'll just, I don't believe the underground connections are shown on your current plan, but we'll want to see where those connections are, so that we're not hitting live wires if we have to open up the sidewalk for any reason.
Right, remember this whole sidewalk is, yes, they're on the full set of drawings. Remember, this whole thing is a bridge, so it's all exposed conduit underneath, down below the structural slab.
Yeah, that's fine. We just want to know where that is.
Yeah, so everything's penetrating the sidewalk, going through the waterproofing layer, going through the structural slab, and then going to electrical boxes underneath. Yep.
Thanks.
Matt, those electrical boxes, you are providing a separate feed from Eversource to power the bollards 24/7, or are they coming out of a street light box?
Those are going through BC. They're going to be controlled, right? I think, John, if I remember back, that's going through your systems because it's going to be part of the overall scheme.
Okay, it's your system, John, so you have 24/7 power.
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah, they're decorative. They're not part of the street lighting. They're going to be a bonus.
Awesome.
All right. Hearing no other questions, I will. I guess we will plan to see you in 4 weeks, and we have some work to do in the interim, and happy to support it and appreciate everybody's willingness to work with us on that.
5 weeks. 5 weeks.
5 weeks. Excuse me. Thank you, Todd. What is the date? The February
29th.
29th. Ooh, unusual one. Okay. All right. We will see you on the 29th. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, and on to our final new business item, new business number 355 Summer Street, Chauncey Street, and Kingston Street, Boston proper, specific repairs, and a petition by BP3-BOS555 Summer Street LLC. Would petitioners please introduce themselves, their affiliations, and give us an overview of this project and the specific actions being proposed here?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners, staff. My name is Jay Eigerman. I'm the land use attorney for the owner of Phase 3 Real Estate. The weird name that you saw is a single purpose entity they set up. Presenting today will be civil engineer Sean Homan of Simpson Gumperts. Could I share my screen just briefly?
Of course, go right ahead.
Okay. All right. So this is a well-known corner in downtown Crossing. I hope you're able to see it. It was redeveloped in the mid-'70s as the headquarters for Charlestown Savings Bank, and it has this unfortunate international style that was fashionable then. There's a pedestrian plaza right on the corner at Chauncey and Summer. That's been open ever since the building has been open. Project went through large project review last spring, extensive comment and happily support from the downtown bid to spruce up that private plaza, but the public ways also need some work, and that's what Sean's going to show you. It's a challenge, as you know, in downtown Crossing to keep these buildings alive with people. It'll be converted, the upper stories, to laboratory space, and there'll be considerable investment. With that, I think I'll turn it over to Sean. I'll stop sharing my screen and have him take over. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sean Holman. I'm civil engineer with Simpson, Gumpertz, and Hager, and today I'm pleased to share with you the site improvements for the specific repair at 55 Summer Street. So here on the screen, I've shown the locus plan to give you a little perspective of where we are. Jared had shared with you the street views of this particular property. So located at the corner of Chauncey and Summer Street, 55 Summer Street has front access from the Summer Street corner, but it also has a rear access yard in the back on Kingston Street, noted here as 11 Kingston Street. So at this particular location, there's access to a loading dock and some other rear yard components. This project has certainly evolved since last spring based on significant collaboration in evolution comments from various stakeholders in the Boston approval parties, as well as some PIC input along the way. This first plan that you've had on your in your docket is the rear yard. So this the rear yard improvements here were primarily issued, and this is where the project started with only rear yard components. This was basically improved to support the utilities in the area. And you can see a significant amount of utilities coming from the rear of the building out into Kingston Street. In addition, in this rear yard, we have the stormwater tank that was installed to satisfy the BWSC recharge requirements. At the public way, we were generally going back to meet existing conditions. However, based on some urban design commentary, they requested that we reduce the width of the access over the curb cut in this area. So we've actually reduced it from 19 feet to 16 feet. And as you can see here, you can see the existing curb cut has actually been reduced down to 16 feet. So that is the general scope of work included with the rear yard component of this project. Moving on to plan number 2. This includes a significant amount of public way improvements. And again, this was added as a result of project direction and stakeholder commentary. Starting from the bottom left-hand corner of this page, you can see that the sidewalk width has been increased per BTD commentary. We've realigned this curb as a result of their commentary to reduce the driving width, but increase the pedestrian access width. All this will be graded to be ADA compliant. In addition to this curb layout, we're hoping and planning to remove and reuse the existing curbs in this area, only providing new curbs where existence cannot be used. Moving up towards the intersection, you can see that in addition to the curb relocation, we have a manhole relocation. So there was an existing catch basin. There's an existing catch basin on that curb line that we had to move out to accommodate the drainage in this area. All this done, of course, with, in accordance with BWSC requirements and approval. Moving towards the intersection, you can see that we've gone for the reconstruction of 3 pedestrian ramps. On the building side, we've reconstructed those to be in accordance with 88 requirements. However, across the street at Uno Doi Go, that particular ramp had some geometric constraints that required us to apply for an MAAB variance, which we were granted. It's just that the geometry in that specific location didn't allow for us to meet the explicit requirements of the ADA requirements. As a result of that, we went through the variance process, got their approval, and have included that filing number for your reference on this plan. In the street, we plan to repaint the affected crosswalks. In addition to supporting these pedestrian ramps, we're calling for the relocation of pedestrian signals, light signals, and sight lighting to facilitate that. Moving plan east, you can see that we have a series of trees that are in the public way. We're calling for we're keeping those in place, maintaining and protecting those during construction. In addition to that, we're installing new grates, and around these trees, we're proposing the installation of permeable pavers. Adjacent to these trees, you can also see that we've called for the installation of bike racks to facilitate bike parking. Closer to the building, not necessarily in the public way, we have a new paver layout with tree wells, certainly improving the aesthetic appeal of this particular plaza, which is currently just a brick paver plaza. Definitely liven up the pedestrian access in this area. We have a series of plans that follow and support this work. On Plan 3, we have the details of the pedestrian ramps and curb cuts, including the Uno Due Go ramp that required that variance, and we're providing explicit details of what that's going to look like and what was approved by the MAAB. Following, we have some more details that can be referenced for rim adjustments in the public right of way. Any handholds or gate valves or castings that are in that that are in the public sidewalk will be readjusted to meet the new proposed elevations. In addition, we kind of, since we're extending the sidewalk into the street, we're running into some castings that are in the street that we'll have to readjust to be within the sidewalk. Again, more details for tactile warning strips that, pretty standard for the pedestrian ramps, as well as driveway details for the Kingston Street side. Again, just providing more guidance on what the sidewalk and driveway restoration will look like, as well as the asphalt pavement that we're trying to meet the existing elevations at the project extents. And here are some more details regarding the permeable pavers that will surround the tree wells, the bike racks adjacent to the tree wells, and then our general detail for the removal and replacement of the vertical granite curb. So with that, that's the general scope of the project. Happy to answer any questions. And again, thank you for your time and opportunity to present our project to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that overview. Thankfully, this is the PIC, not the Civic Design Commission. Otherwise, we might be spending an hour debating whether international style is indeed unfortunate or historic and important. But we can keep our conversation to the surface here. Commissioners, questions, comments?
Hi, Sean. Thank you so much for your presentation. I did have a few comments that I wasn't able to press send on my email in time for this hearing. So I thought I'd just bring them here to see if we can figure out things before public hearing.
Great.
For the sidewalk, we were wondering if there's any adjustments that could be made to the type of curbstones that are used to really maximize the path of travel for the driveway on Kingston?
Kingston, okay.
Yes, yeah. I think it's showing 4.4 clear, and if there's any way to maximize that, if we can gain any more inches there, that would be appreciated. Any investigation that can go into the use of curbstone to just get that level area as close to 5 feet as possible.
Yeah, we can certainly look into the curbstone used there and coordinate with the details of the kind of commercial style driveway ramp that we have there. We'll certainly look at that. Thank you for the comment.
Great, thank you. And then on the Summer Street side, I just had a few questions about the ramp. First, the alignment of the ramp that had gotten the variance, that crosswalk, wondering if there's any adjustments that could be made to either of the ramps to get a more straightforward crossing there.
And so as far as making them a little bit more perpendicular to one another, is that
correct?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly looked at various locations of where we could put this. You know, we're kind of constrained by the trees to the right of the 55 Summer. If we move it closer to that, it would be certainly affecting the trees in that area. And we try to maintain trees in that specific zone. Across the street, you know, we're kind of running into the situation where we wanted to maintain as best as we could the current path while providing a more accessible more accessible than it currently is ramp at that location. And if you can, I'm not sure if you're aware, but that is a pretty that is not currently a compliant ramp. It's hard to work with, particularly because the entrance to Uno Dewey Go is directly behind this location.
It is a very tight corner.
Yes, it's very tight. There's some not as much infrastructure there, but it certainly is a tight corner as far as the geometric constraints that are there. Going off in a more perpendicular may not give us the appropriate kind of wings and ramp for that particular area. We certainly explored and we tried to make it as perpendicular as possible, but again, you know, we were really we either had to move this one up, which would be impeding on the corner here, or move this one down, and we were really impeding on the trees at that location.
Can you bump that corner out? Because it seems like, right, like we have the right Concord Cove bike lane there, there's just the dead space from the parking buffer. So if that whole corner came out to essentially the bike lane, you'd have enough room to put your ramp right there.
Yeah, we certainly looked at bumping that out, and we were trying to we proceeded with the variance with that ramp based on some discussions there. And if we were to, it's just one of those things about, you know, if we were bumping it out there, it'd be more chasing the entire intersection to kind of get that entire intersection redone. At our, you know, during some conversations on this PIC, kind of our progression through this was discussed as an option with some of the members. So we went down this path of variance.
But it seems like you solve all of your problems by bumping out the curb. We get compliant ramps, a perpendicular crossing, and better, right, circulation and sidewalk dimension in front of the business on that corner.
Okay, yeah, I'll take those comments back and consult with the owner, and certainly I'll get some feedback from both Amy and Sarah along the way. Yeah, again, that was kind of our thought process of this particular intersection and kind of the direction we were provided. So
I also heard moving signal equipment. Where you are with that?
yeah, so we basically, so as you can see, for example, with this particular location, remove and relocate existing crossing signal to within 1 foot laterally at the top of the curb ramp, install in coordination with and per PTD requirements. So we show the general location of where the lighting currently was, where we propose it being.
And have you had this conversation with BTD Signals?
We generally had we got direction from them on where they needed to be, and there was some final coordination to be done with them regarding these locations, and they certainly provided some direction on where they wanted to see them.
Is that ramp in front of Macy's compliant?
So currently that ramp is an apex ramp that we've found was constructed within the last 15 years. If you give me a second, I have the street view pulled up. That specific ramp has a significant amount of underground and above ground infrastructure around it. And seeing as though it was recently reconstructed, we called to maintain that specific ramp.
Has compliance been confirmed?
I'd have to look at the existing, I believe it was compliant. I can check the existing grades at that location to confirm that.
Yeah, if we can just double check the compliance of that ramp, it being constructed within the last few years may not guarantee compliance. So just wanted to have that checked out and make sure that's reflected on the plans And if not, that would need to be reconstructed.
I would just note too that the tactile on that ramp is gray and not in keeping with current city standards. So even if the geometry is compliant, we would want to see it, the tactile replaced to maximize accessibility for the visually impaired.
Thank you, Chief. That reminded me of my last comment in the details pages, just making sure that the detail calls out for the cast iron yellow detectable warnings.
Okay.
And that language, I think, can be found in the Public Works detail website that I can send as well.
Thank you.
Sean, I have a couple of points. Can you go back to your specific repair plan?
Which one?
The one that had a bird's eye view of Summer Street and the one which we were just discussing, not that one. The site.
Yep.
Previous one. That one. Okay. Can you show more of the intersection? Can you position it so you see more of the intersection? Okay, move, slow down. Okay. So going east, west, or left to right, you got Summer Street, correct?
Right.
On the south side, you got Chauncey, yes?
Yep.
And the northern side, you got Arch Street. Is it Arch or Kingston?
Arch Street.
Okay.
Arch, yeah.
Right, okay, so, hey Todd, make sure that the petition reflects Arch Street, not Kingston, unless I'm missing something over here. Second point, please do put the street names over here, since there might be confusion. Third thing, the other commission members have been extremely polite in what they are trying to say, but the crosswalk on the right-hand side, that is crossing Summer, think about both a sighted person or a visually challenged person or whatever. That crosswalk, no one's going to use it. I don't use it because I always wonder why it is in the wrong place. So do all that needs to happen to move that crosswalk more in line with the path of travel. Commission members have been very gracious in the way they are saying that thing to you. Okay, so that's what needs to happen. You are introducing a project over here, probably that's going to generate a few pedestrians out of it, right? Sean?
Right.
Okay, so it's going to add to the dynamics that we are having over there. Let's try and do what needs to be done and get the necessary variances that you need, but that crosswalk is in the most unsuitable place. No one's going to go through there. And if you're trying to put someone in a wheelchair to go through there, they have to go right to go, so it doesn't align. So please look into it.
I just want to bolster what Para is saying by noting that I have clicked through about 10 years of Google Street View history during this call, and you will find in almost every single one of those photos people crossing in the natural line of travel outside the crosswalk, right? It's in the wrong place, and we should not put it back in the wrong place.
Thank you, Chief.
May I ask a clarification? So that would require eliminating that one tree. So all things being equal, is that where we're headed?
I think the solution that Amy proposed of extending the current corner there would allow for that crosswalk to be potentially land at roughly the same place on your property side, but to connect at a more logical place on the opposite side of Summer Street from your property and would not impact the tree. The goal is not moving it further away from downtown crossing on Summer Street. The goal is to not have that skewed angle that takes it off of the actual corner.
Yeah, on your side, you would move it all the way to the ped button, right? You don't want to move other stuff and equipment out there, but it can come all the way to the ped button, desirable for those who want to press the button and use the ramp, and then cut to the corner on the other side. So you've actually made this corner bigger, right, a little bit, but this ramp can come up slightly But it's the other side that I think it could come to the corner if you bump it out.
We'll do our best. We'll look at that.
One minor request, your plan has a couple of crosswalks being repainted that have, at least one of which has significant other abutting marks in the form of a double yellow center and a contraflow bike lane. Would request that your plans also note that any crosswalk striping that or relocation that impacts other pavement markings, that those will be redone appropriately so that they're in good condition relative to the new or updated or refreshed markings that you'll be doing.
Understood.
Commissioners, any other questions, comments? All right, KC staff or members of the public?
Two very quick things from me. One, I believe you are showing at least one JC2Co signage structure being impacted. Just if you can confirm that you've worked with property management and JC2Co on that to make sure that there are no concerns with that relocation.
Good morning, Todd. This is Gannon, Ventures with Phase 2 Real Estate. Yes, I'm talking with both folks with the BPDA and JC2Co on this.
Great. And then second, I know that you recently received a handful of comments from the Office of Green Infrastructure. We'll want to see that you consider all of those comments. Some of them might actually be a little bit in conflict with some of our accessibility comments that you've received today. So I'll help you try to navigate the push and pull that will be needed between those sets of comments. But we'll expect that you address those in the next 2 weeks.
Yep, and one item in particular was the use of permeable pavers, which may not have been explicitly shown on this particular plan, but next to the big tree planting areas, so we do have some permeable pavers consistent with the green initiatives.
Great, I'll, like I said, continue to work with you on that.
All right. Will you be ready for your public hearing in 2 weeks on February 8th?
We certainly will attempt to be so. We're going to work diligently to do that.
All right, excellent. Well, we'll plan to see you back then, and please work with all the folks on this call on the issues we've discussed. And thank you very much for the time and review of this with us.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, and with that, we are at the end of our agenda. So do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstain? So moved. See y'all in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.